Hi guys, welcome to our next lecture. This time this is a lecture on business cycles and we are going to go through classical theories here. Generally speaking, business cycles refer to the idea that there are some fluctuations of economic activity about its long-term growth trend. So we've got our potential GDP growing quite smoothly, constantly, but then the economy develops sometimes more quickly, sometimes more slowly than the growth of potential GDP. This is something that is inevitable in market economies. Markets have it, okay? This is one of the shortcomings, one could say even failures of the market. Business cycles are a kind of inevitable product of market system. On the other hand, we know that if you get rid of market and if you switch to central planning, this central planning will have its own business cycles as well. Different from market economy business cycles, but still some business cycles will be present. So we are going to see business cycles as periods of relatively rapid growth. So this would be recovery and prosperity phase, as we are going to call them. And there will be periods of some stagnation or even decline in the economy. This is contraction and recession phase. What's problematic about business cycles is actually that they do not follow any regular pattern. So this is not like sinusoid that you know exactly what will happen in the future. We know that economy fluctuates, but still we find it very difficult to predict when we will have the next recession, how deep it's gonna be, how long would prosperity last, and so on and so forth. To make matter worse, we do not have any single theory that would explain business cycle. We've got a bunch of theories. So some people would say if you have a bunch of theories, then obviously none of them is good enough, so you don't know actually what business cycles are about. But others would say perhaps business cycles are caused by many things, and actually there is no possibility to work out a single theory that would grasp all potential possibilities, all potential reasons for business cycles. So what business cycle look like? This is probably one of very few graphs in my lectures based on Wikipedia, but here it is, okay? It's quite nice, right? So we see economy climbing to a certain peak. Peak is the place of the highest level of the economic activity, and after reaching this peak, the contraction phase starts. So the economy goes down. It keeps going down till it hits some bottom, being called the trough here. And the trough is also a turning point, like peak was the turning point. Economy stopped growing and started declining. For the trough, we've got it stops declining, starts growing. And this is actually the start of the expansion phase. This expansion phase first goes into recovery. So we've got economy recovering from this decline, from this recession, from this contractionary phase. This recovery takes as long as the economy reaches the last peak. It is obviously possible that sometimes it doesn't reach this peak and this recovery is stopped and we go again into contraction. It is possible, right? But in our case here, this recovery is achieved and expansionary phase lasts longer. So the economy goes up and up. It goes beyond the recovery into prosperity phase. Prosperity phase is we are going higher than the last peak. And this prosperity phase finishes with the next peak, after which we've got another contraction, and so on and so forth. As I mentioned, we do not have one theory of business cycle. Actually, we've got two groups of theories. First group are called classical theories. The second group is called Keynesian theories. There are many theories in both categories, here and there, but what I would like you to pay attention to is the difference between those two categories. It is about the major assumption behind the whole economy. Is it stable by itself, or is it unstable by itself? Classics would say the economy itself is stable. Markets have this natural tendency to go into equilibrium mode. Therefore, in fact, the whole economy being a collection of various markets, well, this economy has the tendency to achieve equilibrium. Economy itself is stable, and we see business cycles because there are some external, as we call them, exogenous factors that disturb the economy and break this natural tendency to get to equilibrium. Keynesian theories claim the economy is unstable as such, and disturbance is caused not by external, or not only by external, but also and primarily by internal factors. But let's leave Keynesian theories, let's focus on classical theories today. There are many of them. I'm gonna present to you just three of them. The first one is sunspot theory, developed by Jevons. The idea behind this theory was pretty simple. Jevons noticed that the level of activity on the sun has some influence on the crops. If there are many spots on sun, meaning the level of activity on sun is high, then farmers have bad crops, and because of that we have not enough food produced. Prices of food are growing. Obviously people spend more money, greater part of their income on food, therefore they have less money left for industrial products and other services. So that would explain why the economy may fluctuate, right? That was a very nice theory, very nice idea. However, it's not true. I mean, if we enlarge the period, extend the period of observation, then we will see that contrary to what Jevons claimed, there is no this kind of relation between the number of spots on the sun and the level of food production by agricultural businesses. So that's not correct. A different story, political business cycle. So the idea is the economy is stable itself, but these are politicians that disturb the economy. And this is a nice theory explaining quite a lot when it comes to democratic countries. You know, this political business cycle theory is based on a few very simple assumptions. Assumption number one: politicians like to be elected. Assumption number two: if politicians get elected, they like to be re-elected. Assumption number three: actions taken by politicians can influence the economy. And the fourth assumption: economic situation of a country can influence the way that people vote. As you can see, all those four assumptions are pretty easy to accept. They seem to be quite true. So imagine I'm a politician, I'm the prime minister of the country, and I see that elections are coming. What can I do to make people like me? What can I do to make them vote for my party? First of all, do people like paying taxes? No, they don't. How about I try to decrease taxes to make it kind of attractive for people to vote for me? So before elections, I'm gonna lower taxes. Do people like getting money from the government? Oh yes, they do. So how about in the period before elections, I'm gonna increase government spendings, I'm gonna increase transfers, like additional payment for pensioners, for instance, or you've got kids, you will get some money for your kids, or your kids go to school, okay, you will get extra money for school things like books and pens and pencils and stuff. People should like that. So far I decreased taxes, I increased government spendings. What else can I do? Well, I could lower the interest rate. People like that as well. In many cases this might be problematic because the central bank is thought to be independent from the government, from politicians. But if I can have some influence on the central bank, I will do that. I will lower the interest rate. People find it nice, your mortgage is easier to manage, okay? If you run a business, well, you can take a bank loan and it's easier to pay it back. What kind of economic impact would it have? Well, if you lower taxes and if you increase spendings, then probably you will have budget deficit, you will have public debt growing, you can cause inflation because people get a lot of money from you, or you don't take a lot of money from them because you decrease taxes, so their income is bigger, their demand will be bigger, and aggregate demand, if it's bigger, then it causes inflation. This inflation would actually develop because one of the ways to prevent inflation from growing is increasing interest rates. But what we do was actually the opposite, we decrease interest rates. So we are going to have bad financial situation for the government budget, and we are going to have inflation. But you know what? This will happen after the elections. It takes time, it takes time for those bad things to occur. But just before elections, if I do all those things, I'm gonna win elections. If I win elections, then I will increase taxes, then I will cut down government spendings, and I will push up interest rates to stabilize the economy. And I have, let's say, 3 years to do so, because in the 4th year, before next elections, I'm gonna spoil the economy once more just to win election. Doesn't it sound kind of familiar when you think of your country? Don't politicians do that? Someone may argue, yeah, but this does not guarantee your political success. This is true. So I can spoil the economy, and nevertheless, people may be so fed up with me and my party, they would vote for someone else, and someone else may win the elections. It may be bad in short term, in short run, but it's not that bad in the long run. Why? Because if my opponents win the elections, what would they do is they would increase taxes, they would decrease government spendings, they would push up the interest rate, and I can attack them and explain to people, you see, when I was in charge for a country, then it was possible to have low taxes, you got a lot of money from the government, interest rates were low and nice, and look at them. What did they do, right? Next time you'd better vote for me. Okay, so this is the idea behind political business cycle. And there is also innovation-driven business cycle, but we will explain it in a few minutes. Okay? So let's have a look at traditional business cycle models. There are actually 4 guys that we mention here when it comes to traditional business cycle models. So we've got the so-called kitchen inventory cycle, named after Kitchen, who discovered that inventory fluctuates in this kind of period, like 3 to 5 years, 4 on average. Okay, and those changes in inventory, Kitchen claimed, would actually bring business cycles to the economy. The most classical, the most well-known fixed investment cycle, developed by Clément Gigler. It is a longer business cycle. It's like 10 years, from 7 to 11 in fact, and you can see a bunch of throats that are listed here, right? From 19th century till the 20th century, with the Great Depression in 1929. Then we also have infrastructural investment cycle by Kuznets, who says every 20 years, roughly from 15 to 25, every 20 years there are huge infrastructural investments made, and that brings traditional business cycle again here, right? And the last concept, the last idea, the Kondratiev cycle, or as we call it, Kondratiev wave, because that's a long-term thing, in fact, so we call it a wave sometimes, after Nikolai Kondratiev, American economist of Russian origin, who said every 50 years there is a great invention that changes the economy in such a significant way that virtually all the aspects of human life are changed. And you can see those great inventions here, right? So we have the beginning of 19th century. We've got steam engine and cotton. Huge inventions. Steam engine. The possibility of replacing machines powered by human muscles or animals. Well, steam engine was much stronger. Machines could be much bigger. Steam engines actually allowed manufacturing to move to a completely new level. Mass production was kind of possible starting with steam engine, right? And cotton, very cheap, efficient thing for clothing. So the problem of clothing was much reduced thanks to cotton. People could afford nice things made of cotton instead of wool or linen or other less efficient ways for providing clothes. Half a century later, we've got railways, right? So someone says, why wouldn't we use a steam engine to power a vehicle? Trains, transportation, that changes everything again, right? These are not horses and carriages. Railways, stations, trains, locomotives, everything changes. And you can see the beginning of the 20th century and the era of post-Second World War with petrochemicals, plastics, automobiles, this kind of stuff. And like 40 years later, you've got IT revolution. The internet appears. Think to what extent the internet changed your life, right? This is completely different life from the life of your grandparents, for instance, living like 40, 50 years back. So probably by 2030 or 2040, we will have another great invention that will change our economy, that will change our lives. What could it be? Well, my personal favorite is artificial intelligence. I believe that in 10 years' time, it's gonna become a very important part of our life. And actually, this artificial intelligence, apart from being very important, will probably be very dangerous. I mean, the changes brought by artificial intelligence will be huge and not necessarily very much positive. They could be also quite negative, right? But this is something we can obviously discuss using our forum. Perhaps it won't be artificial intelligence after all. Perhaps something else, something that we currently don't know. Yeah, it's possible. And the last element of our lecture now is on the synthesis made by Joseph Schumpeter. Well, he said, well, perhaps those four guys, Kondratiev, Kuznets, Gigla, and Kitchen, are not competitors. I mean, perhaps their theories are not competitive ones. Perhaps these are complementary theories. Perhaps they tell some stories, and those four stories are correct at the same time. So the idea of the synthesis would be Kondratiev wave is just a fluctuation, long-term, very long-term fluctuation from the general trend of potential GDP growth. So we've got this line of GDP growing quite smoothly over time, and then we've got Kondratiev wave when the economy sometimes develops faster and sometimes develops more slowly over the period of 50 years. Then we've got Kuznets wave, and this Kuznets wave uses Kondratiev wave as a trend line. So the Kuznets cycle would mean some fluctuations up and down from the Kondratiev wave. And you can fit like 2 or 3, let's say, Kuznets wave into one Kondratiev wave. But then we've got Giglar, and we would say up to 2 Giglar waves could be fit in one Kuznets wave. And this Giglar cycle would use Kuznets wave as its trend. So Giglar would be about fluctuating around the Kuznets wave. And there is Kitchen, this shortest wave, the shortest cycle, that would mean fluctuations up and down from Giglar, and Giglar being its trend line. The idea developed by Schumpeter was actually to explain Great Depression, because if you imagine those 4 types of business cycles placed one on another, then you could say, all right, it is possible that the lowest part of Kondratiev wave could match at the same time with the lowest part of Kuznets wave and Ziegler cycle and Kitchen cycle. So each cycle takes us lower and lower and lower at the same time. If 4 throws happen at the same time, they may push the economy low into quite significant depression. And that was the explanation provided by Schumpeter for Great Depression. All 4 business cycles hit the whole, hit their lowest levels at the same time, bringing American economy, and not only American economy, to its knees, to the lowest level that people could imagine at that time. So that is the synthesis by Schumpeter, and actually that is all about classical theories of business cycles. Thank you.